Good afternoon and welcome to the next Deep Crawl webinar. My name is Jon Myers and I have the pleasure of hosting you again this month. And today we're going to talk about how to make content more human. That's a fantastic title, and to back that up, we have a fantastic speaker today who is Becky Simms. Welcome, Becky, and thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Jon. I'm excited.
Anytime, it's great to have you here. Becky is the founder and CEO of Reflect Digital. I appreciate you guys coming on board. Maybe it's the first time that you've listened, maybe it's your repeat monthly visitors. We appreciate that today is ironically the hottest day of the year. So thank you for taking time to come in from the garden or out of the sunshine to listen to what we have to say. And we have a fantastic presentation for you, as mentioned. For you guys that are on the line that have been here before, it's the usual format. We're going to do around about 40 minutes of presentation, and then it will be into the Q&A. And we absolutely love questions. As you know, I like asking them. I like getting those questions and getting those answers from you guys as you deserve. And the speaker deserves to get those feedbacks on the things that they present. Please, please, please don't wait till the end. Submit your questions via the chat box that's at the side of your screen. So we have lots to go from when we get into the Q&A in around about 40 minutes time. As always, the webinar is recorded, and there will be a full recap live on the DC blog this week, available for you guys to obviously listen to back to the webinar in full on the audio side, pick out all of the questions that will be written up in the blog post, and obviously we'll email out to any attendees that have obviously filled in that want to get the content as well. So today is all about content, and there really is lots of it. I've had a look through these slides. They look fantastic, and I'm very much looking forward to this one myself. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to our speaker today, Becky Simms, the CEO of Reflect Digital, to take us through the next 40 minutes on how to make your content more human. I'm looking forward to this one as much as you guys are. So over to you, Becky, and the floor is yours for the next 40 minutes.
Perfect. My computer is just asking me to give permission, so bear with me 1 second.
No problem at all.
We should, can you see my screen now? Have we got the screen on?
Not yet.
Let's try
there we go.
One.
There we are.
There we go. Brilliant. You love an Apple. It always wants you to reconfirm everything. So here we go. Cool. I will. So I'm going to hit present mode and let's dive in. Let's keep everyone awake and ready to get a beer in the garden afterwards, I'm sure. So yeah, thank you so much for having me today, and thank you so much for giving me this platform to share this talk. We've got some really interesting slides. We've got tons to get through. So without further ado, I'm going to get started and let's dive in. So content is at the heart of every single strategy. It's what you say about your brand. It's how you bring your values, your mission, everything to life, and it runs through absolutely everything. And today we're going to take it with a focus on SEO, but also I think some of the lessons that we're talking about here are things that you can take into the email that you write, or the proposal that you write. It could be anything where you are writing, because we're going to talk about principles of how to make content more engaging, and it doesn't just have to be an article on a website. So I guess that's just a cue to think about that as we're going through this, and think about how you can to implement this into the way you write going forward. So the audience are at the heart of your strategy as much as the content is, and the thing we have to remember about our audience is that they're humans. It doesn't matter if you're in a B2C world or a B2B world, it's always a human at the end of your marketing message that's there to listen and for you to grab their attention. And I think that sometimes gets lost. So how often do you really put the human lens on your content? How often do you really quiz yourself on, have I actually really made sure this content does what I want it to do for the person that's going to read it and is going to help spark action from them? So today I'm going to be giving you some new ways to look at content. And the idea is we want to complement your existing strategy. So this isn't to overhaul, this is to help add some incremental improvements that are going to help you to see more conversions if it's for your content online, or more engagement, whether it's content that you're putting out on social or just in an email campaign. And the idea is we want this to work in harmony with your SEO strategy. So at Reflect Digital, that's a big part of what we do is SEO. And fundamentally, the way you do SEO doesn't need to change. You need to ensure what I'm talking about today isn't going to mean that suddenly you're going to rank better, but this is going to complement it and help to drive more conversions off the back of it, and it's going to work in harmony. So meet Bert. Why have I got Bert on the screen? Well, Bert's become an SEO icon, and he's a Muppet, but he has given us the gift of human content. So what do I mean? Some of you out there might know and some might not. Well, why am I talking about Bert? Bert was an update that Google did at the end of last year. And if you want to know what it stands for, it's there on screen. So bidirectional encoder representations from transformers. Please don't hang up now and leave the webinar. It sounds very technical, doesn't it? And it is in the background, but actually I'm going to break it down for you and tell you why this has given us the gift of human content. So according to Google, it is the most important update in the last 5 years. And I truly would agree with that. It affected 1 in 10 searches, so it really has made a big effect in the way people search and the results that they would see. And Google have said themselves that the idea of the BERT update and what it did was it was around improving language understanding. So the idea was that it would help Google to be able to understand queries that were using more natural language or conversational kind of queries. And the idea is that it helps Google to understand context better. It's something that we as humans take for granted. We understand the context of where a word fits in a sentence and therefore what that means to that sentence. But it's something that Google actually over the years has struggled with. So especially in those conversational queries, and I guess that brings us onto the topic of voice search and how more and more we're starting to search using our mobile phones and voice, and thinking about our home devices we might be using as well. So this is a massive step forward for Google. And the idea is with this in place, and as it starts to learn and improve, because there is AI built into this, we're all going to be able to search in a way that really feels natural to us, but gets us the right result at the end of it. This is awesome news. It really and truly is. It means we can be more human and think less about keywords. But how does BERT work? I love this phrase, this quote: "You shall know a word by the company it keeps." And I don't think until really looking at the BERT algorithm update and how this works and how it's affected search going forward, I don't think that would have meant as much to me as it does now. And working in the search industry, you really, and I'll show you and I'll bring it to life for you here. So here's some examples of 3 different words, and how, depending on the sentence, the word has completely changed its meaning. So first of all, crane. So the bird is a crane versus they had to use a crane to lift the object. I don't need to point out to you that what that word crane means and why it's different. Your brain does that without you even thinking about it. But to Google, that previously was difficult to do, to understand the context of that. So that is what BERT does for us. And here's an example. This was one of the examples Google put out when they first launched the update. So this was in the US, and this was the search query: "Can you get medicine for someone pharmacy?" And you can see on screen the before and the after of what the search results would show. Previously, it was kind of suggesting how to get a prescription filled, because it didn't understand the context of that as a sentence. And then with BERT in place, it's been able to understand, actually, you're looking to go to a pharmacy and pick up medicine for somebody else, which is what, as a human, we would have understood straight away. So we need to start focusing on that human that sits behind the search phrase. We've got the tools to go and understand the data and the search volumes and what it is that someone's searching for, but actually, who is it that sits behind that? We can get so wrapped up in the algorithm and chasing ranking positions that we forget that to truly be good as an SEO, our job is to spark action from users. We actually want them to do something. So therefore, that content we've written on the page is really important. Now, I believe by understanding humans, it will make us all better: SEOs, marketers, social media execs, whatever it is that you do that uses content. If we understand the human at the end of it better, we're going to do a better job. So question, and you won't be able to answer me, but just think to yourself: how well do you know your audience? And you'll probably sit there thinking, yeah, we've done a bit of this, we've got some personas, we kind of know it, but how well do you really know them? So this, again, I'm not looking for you to give me the answer, but just think in your head. I'm going to describe 2 male people. So they both live in London. They're both between 30 and 40 in age. They're both millionaires. That would be nice, wouldn't it? And they're both parents. So we've got some demographics there, the type of thing that maybe you might know about your audience. You might know their age, where they live, their kind of salary bracket, and whether they're parents or not. So have a think in your head, who could it be? Well, let me show you. I've described to you there Skepta and Prince William. Now, you couldn't really get much further apart, could you? And yet demographically, they fit into those same boxes. But if I said to you, right, we've got a campaign and we need it to reach Skepta and Prince William, and it's got to be the same message, you'd probably start scratching your head. But giving you those demographics, you'd probably run away and go, right, here we go, this is the campaign, here's the message, this is how we're going to reach them. And that's the thing, demographics can mislead us because the human at the other end is different. We're all different. And how do we understand that and use that? So today is about helping to reinvigorate your editorial flair. And don't worry if you're sitting there thinking, I've never had editorial flair. I'm going to hopefully give you some. And we're going to try and keep SEO at the forefront as well, because this is complementary to SEO. This works with SEO, and especially when we recognize that Bert and Google love and understand human content. So let's watch some website content in real life. Now I'm going to play you a quick video. Again, please don't let this send you to sleep. I'll end it before you get to that point, but just bear with me and have a watch.
Across our network of showrooms, we stock vehicles from quality car makers: Toyota, Nissan, Volkswagen, Renault, Dacia, and Audi. We provide top quality, brand new and approved used cars, along with excellent after-sale services. We have locations in Ashford, Bristol, Bromsgrove, Canterbury, Cardiff, Coulston, Dartford, Newbury, Newport, Oxford, Reading, Sandwich, Chatford, Tunbridge Wells, and Worcester.
There we go. I'll put you out of your misery. We don't speak like that, do we? You'd never pick up the phone and talk like that to a customer, and yet somehow we think it's okay to put it on our websites. And that was content from a website. I won't name the brand, but yeah, we don't speak like that. So I want you to think differently about content, to take a new focus, a human focus. And why? Well, because without this, you are failing your audience. So economists have realised that people don't always respond predictably or rationally to things like price and value. And there's a ton of amazing books, and there's just 4 of them on screen there that I'd highly recommend that will kind of cover this off and give you this idea. And neuroscientists have discovered that all decisions are weighed up emotionally, even the ones that we truly believe we've been logical and rational about. Emotion is in there. But digital marketing has become so measurable. Is this focus at the expense of the content? So I need to add a new check to your SEO process. And hopefully this, if you're an SEO person, this will be familiar to you. So you've got a new customer, or you're in a new business and you're learning about the company. So you start by defining what that market looks like. You then break it down and define it into audiences, most likely more than one, and really kind of start to understand what they look like. And then you go and do your keyword research, because we want to know, what are they searching for that we're trying to optimize for? And then if you're doing a really good job, you're going to start to map this to the sales funnel. You're going to understand which keywords sit at that kind of unaware and starting to become aware phase, and which ones have much more intent to buy or to inquire. So you're going to understand that. Here's the new bit. This is where you then need to uncover your audience motivations and really understand what motivates them. And then you can go back to your normal process, but you're going to use what you've learned there. So I hear you ask, how do we do this? What does this mean? So I'm going to give you 30 seconds while I sip a bit more tea. And I just want you to think in your head for a second about what's most important to you about your career. And we're looking for kind of 1-word answers. And I'll start you off. I'll give you some examples, what 3 words I might pick. So mine might be fame for the business. So I want our business to be super successful and famous. It might be security for for the team and for the business to know that we're going to continue to grow profitably and that we can keep offering everyone the job that we want to offer them. And then finally, it might be team happiness, the fact that I love my team and I want them to love to come to work every day and to enjoy what they do. So their happiness is really important. So have a little think for a second what yours might be, and it'll all become clear in a second how that's going to help you to understand this model. Cool, so maybe you've got a few. So let me introduce you to the unique persona model that we use within the lab group, and Reflect Digital sits within the lab group. Now this is a persona model called Monkey, Lion, Dog, very playfully named, and it's based on 5 different psychology theories, and we've taken bits from all of them to create a model that worked for us in understanding audience motivation. So the URL at the bottom, you can follow that, and if you want to go and actually take the test and find out where you sit properly, you can. But also, as I walk through these, those words that you've thought of, you're going to be able to identify where they sit. So the monkey is your need to understand context and where you sit in the world. We then have the lion. This is kind of the rational part of our brain. This is where we want to weigh things up and understand the benefits and really kind of get into the detail. And then the dog is all about our feelings and our emotions. So this is the customer's desire to feel connected to an audience or to their team or to their friends or family. So rolling back a slide, and I did this on purpose, for me, that fame for the business would sit in monkey, the need to contextually understand where the business sits and how successful it is. And security would sit within lion, because it's kind of really understanding financially where we sit and are we going to be secure as a business long term. And then finally, the team happiness would be in the dog, the emotional side. So really wanting to feel connected to those around me. So maybe you can use the words you thought of to see where you might sit. Obviously, I've gone across the board, and we will all be a bit of each of these. And these slides, I won't go through these in detail, but if you download the slides afterwards, you'll be able to see these. We've just got some more words there that just help spark what we mean by a monkey, and then by a lion, that real rational thinking, and then the dog, so the emotional, the feelings, the connection. And what we then do with that is, as we start to uncover not just, okay, our audience is between 30 and 40, it's male, all those kind of demographic bits of information. Instead, we start to say, well, actually, we think our audience is more skewed towards monkey and contextual, for example. Therefore, our messaging and our content really needs to sit in that world where we're making them realize by buying our product or service how it's going to affect how they're viewed. So, for example, a fashion brand that's like a really kind of high-end brand, monkey messaging would be really good for them, because for some people, especially brands that have labels all over them and that's what you see outwardly, some of that is status and it's being part of something. So that kind of thing, and that's how we use it, and we take it into messaging. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea, and you can go away and start to have a think about your audiences within that kind of monkey, lion, dog, and what that means about what motivates them. So then how do we make our content more human? And what's the impact? Because that's always the question as a marketer, isn't it? Why would we do something unless we understand the impact? Well, for us, it's rankings, because we know that Google cares about this more, and we know if we're writing better content, that's going to help. But then it's that increased conversions. It's how we're going to, when someone's hit our website and they're on a page, how do we connect with them better and have a story there and a journey that's going to match up with what they're looking for to drive increased conversions, whether that's sales, whether that's watching a video, whether that's inquiring about a service. And how can we speak our audience's language? So we've been listening to what audiences are saying. And at Lab, we have this tool called Comparative Linguistic Analysis. And what this means is we're able to take 2 sets of unstructured data, that's kind of language-based data, and do comparisons. So let me walk you through some examples. We've recently, and this is a report that's coming out very soon, so you're first to see this data, but we took Twitter data for January this year, and then we looked at kind of March, April, June. We looked at a spread of them, and the full report is going to have a real deep dive into how those trends changed. But just to give you a bit of a feel, so this was looking at pre and post COVID-19, what people were saying. And we've seen that we have a lot less to look forward to. So roll back to January, people were 4.5 times more likely to say they couldn't wait to get paid, or that they were looking forward to holidays or a date in the future or a surprise that was coming up. So it was really focused on things that were coming. And right now, we're not saying that at all. So this has led to us believing that actually there's a real need for immediate gratification. And that ties in with actually us shopping online more. Yes, part of that is because we can't get the bits we need in the shops, for example, but there is this real desire from a human point of view to get some kind of immediate gratification because we don't know what the future holds. But we've also seen that lots of people have been sharing their final straw. What do I mean by that? Well, we were looking at the way people were speaking, and we were able to analyze it in the context of final type context. So this is people saying things like, I will never. And when it came to talking about delivery, and this was comparing April to March, people were 6.1 times more likely to talk about delivery in a final type context. So where we're ordering more online and then things started to become less reliable, people are getting frustrated. And then on top of this, customer service was mentioned 1,252 times more during lockdown than it was pre-lockdown, so looking at January. So that's a great understanding to start to see how are people speaking and what are the trends. And some of that we might have been able to deduce ourselves when it comes to lockdown. But to give you another quick example, we did this recently for a gaming business, and they wanted to look at UK and US marketing and compare how the UK and US gamers spoke. So for this, we looked at Twitter, we looked at gaming forums, we took comments off of YouTube, anywhere we could get specific gaming profiles and where we could get access to content that was freely available. We were able to pull that into the system and analyze it. And in this, we found that US gamers were 8 times more likely to talk about pay and money and debt and bills. So really focused on gaming from a business perspective. And then also to talk more about tournaments and competitive gaming. So suddenly we've learned again that the US audience is much further forward and more vocal about talking about pro gaming. So these were some really great insights, and this was just 2 of a, 30-page deck of insights, some of which that really gave us some ideas around the type of language we should be using in the US versus the UK. So this is really cool. We can use this to take any data and pull it together and compare it. And we can compare it based on locations, like the gaming example. We can compare it based on demographics. So if it's data where you then know the age or the sex of someone or the likes or dislikes, we can use that and layer that over the top and make that the comparison to see how they speak differently. Or we can do time-based like we did for COVID. And the whole point of this is to help us to be able to drive more relevancy by understanding the language that our audience is speaking, by going there and looking at what they've got and looking at it on mass scale, because we can take thousands and thousands of conversations and very quickly start to pull out trends. So we're now going to look at neuro-driven content. So we understand how we're going to get motivations. We now know a way that we might be able to go and understand what people are saying. Well, how do we then create content and use some neuro concepts to make that content better? So we're going to look at 4 different types of language. And we're going to start with uninspiring language. So that's kind of boring language, language where we're not being descriptive and we're not making it really engaging for the user. And you'll be amazed how often it's used. I've got some stats to share with you in a bit. And I bet most of us are criminal at one time or another of creating content like that video I played earlier. And you do see it less and less now. I think people have woken up to the world of writing better content to some degree, but it's still out there. That was a live example. So we need to move away from that. We need to make our content sticky. You've made all the effort to get someone to visit your website. The last thing you want them to do is leave immediately. We want to hold on to them, and to do that, we need to make engaging content. We need to make it memorable. For most of us, if we're looking to drive business from our website, we're quite unlikely to drive that business on the very first visit. So therefore, we need to make sure that our website sticks in their minds and is something that they remember and come back to later. And we need to evoke emotion. And this is completely linked to memory, because emotions are part of the way that we create memories. When we have a peak in emotion, that makes us so much more likely to remember something. So if you can bring emotion to your content, you're going to be much more likely to make it memorable. And then we're going to look at the balance between self-obsessed and selfless language. So you need to ensure your content is outside in versus inside out. So inside out would be me sitting here today just broadcasting. Reflect Digital does this, 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 and this, and just speaking at you, as opposed to starting with what the problem is of we want to engage our customers more, and how do we do that? And eventually it might be that we get to the solution is something that we can help with, but we started with our customer first rather than just broadcasting. And then we've got static versus dynamic language. So what do I mean by this? So static language is language that's really talking about the here and now. It's in the present, and it's kind of detail based, and it's features and benefits, that type of thing. Whereas dynamic language is where we start to look at impacts and what's going to happen next, and what's the future look like based on buying this product or using this service. And there's a balance to be had between the two. There's no right or wrong, but actually as humans, we'll gravitate towards one or the other that's more important to us. I'm a real impact person. I want to know the next bit, but some people will be really in the detail. So it's trying to understand that about your audience and getting the right fit for your audience within your content, or having a mix of both. Now, you may not realize it, but we have a lot of power through the words that we choose to use. So let me take you to Florida. Actually, that's going to be tricky at the moment. Instead, let me introduce you to Jon Myers. Now, in 1996, he ran an experiment that's become known as the Florida effect. And what he did, and this was in a university, he took two groups of students and he put them both in separate rooms. And in the rooms, they had pieces of paper with words on. And as far as they were all concerned, they were all random words. Group one truly did have random words, but group two, their random words were dotted with words that would make you think of older people. So for example, bald and wrinkled, and Florida, because apparently that's where everyone in the US that's old goes to retire. I didn't choose that, but there we go. And what he did was he asked them to take those pieces of paper in their groups and to arrange the words into sentences. And group two would have had no idea that they had words that made them think of old people, in that there was lots of words there. And then when they'd finished, they were instructed that they were to leave the room, walk down a really long corridor to his office, and then they just had to sign a piece of paper and leave. And what they were looking for, and what they found, was that group two took on the persona of an older person. They had been primed with words that made them think of older people, and it had completely unknowingly to them changed their behavior. They were slower in how they walked. They had taken on this persona, which is mad. It just shows you the impact that we can have by the words that we choose. And how often have you just written something and not really thought about it and sent it off an email or published a piece of content, when actually really thinking about how those words set the scene and what they might do to the person's frame of mind from a priming point of view is really, really important. And then finally, we've got visual, auditory, and kinesthetic language. So what do I mean by this? Well, visual is I see what you mean. Auditory is I hear what you're saying. Kinesthetic is it feels to me like. And we will all have a bias between visual, auditory, and kinesthetic as to which one we prefer, and therefore which one we use more of. So the idea of bringing this up is just that we need to be aware of trying to find out what our bias is, and then try not to use that bias. Instead, try to be across visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, because that's going to be important to your audience, because some of them might be biased in a different way. And this is just trying to make our content more inclusive and more engaging for everyone. And the idea is that we're trying to learn how to master content that's going to spark emotion, and most importantly, action, because action's what we want, isn't it? We don't want someone to just read something and leave. We want them to do something. So it's like Christmas today, although it definitely doesn't feel like it in the UK at 30 degrees, but it is like Christmas because I've got a gift for you. I've got ratemycontent.co.uk. This is a website we built last year and it's totally free to use. You don't even need to give us an email address. It's just there to use. And what this does is it takes those four psychology ideas and it gives you scores on them. So you can copy and paste your content in, or you can pop a URL in. Copy and pasting does give a bit more accurate results, just because if you're using a URL, it might pick up on words that are around the content. So what does it do? It gives you 4 scores. So the first score comes on the borometer. I apologise if you get a boring score. I'm very sorry. I have had one before. It does happen. So we're all in it together. And this is looking at the words that you're using and how engaging they are, and trying to see the balance of the amount of content that you've got and how many descriptive words you're using. We then have the static versus dynamic score. So this is represented by the tarot cards, and you will either see the present if it's static, the future if it's dynamic, or both if it's balanced between the two. And there's no right or wrong answer on that one. It's more thinking about what you were aiming for with that content, if it was more detail based or more future impact based. You then have this lovely couple that are either going to share their candy floss, or he's going to keep it all, or he's going to hand it all over. And again, that's going to represent whether you are being selfish in your content and talking about yourself too much, whether you're balanced, or whether you're being customer centric and selfless. And again, it depends on the page. If it's your About Us page, it's okay to be selfish and talk about yourselves, but otherwise, balanced or customer centric would be ideal. And then finally, we've got visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. So at the top of the meter, you're going to see the number of words. And then on the scale, you're going to see what that looks like in context of the amount of words you've got in total, to give you a feel for whether you could try and increase it. So let's look at 2 examples. I've got the Porsche 911 page. Now, the Porsche can't be boring, can it? It definitely can't. Well, Porsche made it so. They achieved a boring score on their content by just not being descriptive enough. We then have the static score. So they got a static score of present, which again, it can happen when it's product-based because there's lots of features and benefits about a car to talk about. But you also could look to explain more about what life's going to be like with a Porsche. And wow, I can imagine that. I can imagine the kind of descriptive words you could use around that. It then got a selfish score, so mentioning themselves too much and not mentioning you and the customer and bringing that into the content. And then finally, lots of visual words. So great, they've used lots of words to talk about what it looks like, but they've not necessarily got any auditory and not many kinesthetic words in there. So that's a car. And once you bought a car, you're going to need some car insurance. And car insurance is boring, isn't it? Well, Compare the Market have made it engaging. So it does show that it's possible. They've made boring insurance content engaging. And they've made it dynamic. They've made it about the future. They've, instead of being too much in the detail, they've made it about impact. They've made it selfless as well. So they put the customer first and made sure that they're talking about the customer in the content. And then they've not done quite as well on the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, but I think we can forgive them for the other great scores. But at least they've got something now that they're clear on what they could work on by using this tool. So since we launched it, we've had over 650 business-to-business web pages that have been run through the site, and we've been able to draw some trends. So I thought I'd share some of these with you today. And the results might shock you. They also might not. You might be expecting this. Well, let's get into it. So 45% of B2B content scored a boring score. It doesn't need to be boring though. Just because we're talking in a business manner, we need to remember it's still a human, and therefore we still need to make it engaging. And only 13% achieved an engaging score. So that's a really low number that actually have achieved something that is engaging from a user perspective. 70% was static, so very much in the detail and not about impact. And actually, when you're selling business to business, I, as a business owner, I want to know about impact. If I'm going to spend money with whoever you are, I want to know what's the impact on my business. So that's a bit of a shame that there's not more dynamic content there. And then 40% was selfish, so talking too much about themselves and not putting the customer first. And then just to flip it to B2C, and just to give you a bit of a feel, this was much less data at this point, but we looked at 100 entertainment and leisure websites, which surely that can't be boring. Well, 52%, even higher than on the B2B side, achieved a boring score. That's really disappointing, isn't it? Because leisure and entertainment, well, it's fun. Like you've got carte blanche to be using exciting words. And then 82% was static, so it was more about detail and less about impact. So you might be able to expect that, but also there probably is room for balance. And 48% was selfish, so really putting themselves first. So we're going to start to wrap up. I've got 9 tips for you to make your content more human. So taking everything we've talked about, what can you really take away? So number 1 is be more descriptive and be fun. You need to play with your language. As humans, we love descriptive words. We find them more engaging and they grab our attention. So use this, and don't feel that you can't if you're in a sector that feels more boring. Like, you can still use this. Think about emotion and how you can bring emotion to your content. What feelings does your product or service evoke, and how can you use it? And remember that this is going to help make you more memorable. Now, be outside in, not inside out. Think about your audience's challenges first before broadcasting what it is that you do. And think about context. Don't just explain features. Remember, what is the impact? What happens next? Why? Look to the future. And then think about visual, auditory, and kinesthetic language. So you've got some examples of words on screen here. Think about how you can start to use more of a mix of all of this type of language, and see if you can work out where your bias sits. Using Rate My Content and putting a few pieces through, you'll start to get a feel for it. And balance. Remember that Google understands context more than ever before. So ensuring you've got that balance between human first and the signals that we know Google needs to rank a website well. And then consider how you can get closer to your audience's language. So we talked about CLA, Comparative Linguistic Analysis. It might be that that's not something you can do straight away, but think about going to the places where your audience are putting their content, and see if you can understand how it is they're speaking, and see how you can reflect their choice of language and match the trends that they're talking about. Motivations. Remember monkey, lion, dog. Think about how, when we're trying to attract the attention of humans, how can you use their intrinsic motivations, what's deep within them, to draw them in? And remember the old people. Well, they weren't old, were they? Remember the fact that we have power with the words we choose, and how this power can affect a user's behavior, and be really aware of this. So let me tie this all together. We've learnt about humans and how to think about their motivations, language, and hopefully not in a boring English lesson way. Instead, we've learned how we can use comparative linguistic analysis to uncover more targeted language and trends within the demographics that we're looking to target. And how we need to be more colourful with the language that we choose, to be sticky, to be memorable, and to evoke emotion. And how we need to balance ourselves and our audience. And how we can balance the why and the what of the current situation with the future and the so what. We need to balance the detail and the context. And then finally, we've learned about how we need to be conscious to use a variety of visual, auditory, and kinesthetic language. So on that note, it's been great to virtually see you all today. Thank you so much for listening, and I really hope that you've heard at least one thing that you can go away and implement tomorrow. And I hope that I've been able to shift your view on content, and that I've made an impact on how you think and how you interact with others. So, Ernie, how did we do? Yeah, he likes it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Deep Crawl for having me on today. You can download the slides on our website at /Deep Crawl. As John said at the start, there's going to be an amazing write-up later this week on Deep Crawl's website, and you'll be able to watch the video back. And most importantly, make sure you go and rate your content and see how you're doing. Thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed it.
No, thank you, Becky. Thank you so much. And I'm already wanting to go and rate some content. I love the idea of the borometer. This sounds fun. You're going to have me for hours of play on that one for sure, without a doubt.
It's quite get the boring score though. It does. It makes you realise. It is a little bit, yeah. It makes you try harder. It really does.
No, I can imagine. So we've got some questions, which is always great, even on a day like this. And I appreciate that you guys are taking the time out of the sunshine for us and everything like that. So I really appreciate the engagement that's still on the line. As always, if you've tuned in before, I always like to ask the question from the first person that submits a question. And actually, it's around writers and stuff like that. Jill has come forward and said, my team, the writers, are focused on the humans. You know, our team keeps insisting that BERT is made Google more human friendly, but it pushes from the keywords rather than the search intent in the same breath. I wonder if there's ever really going to be a happy medium. And I know that you touched on it and talked about the human versus the obviously the Google. Is there a way that you would recommend it? Because obviously I'm guessing Jill's very much in the human world because she's a writer, not an SEO as such. But then there's that push for the writers to focus towards the SEO. Will Google get there, or is it kind of find that balance?
I think so. I mean, there is, for us, we always approach it with having a bit of a creative brainstorm with whoever it is that's writing, especially if this feels like it's going to be something that's going to lock heads on if the keyword search doesn't really match up with what we think the human wants to hear. So it's kind of taking it into a creative brainstorm and bringing it back to, okay, so motivations of the audience, that we're never going to get away from being able to use the keywords. Like if that's what someone's searching with, we're going to have to use that on the page because yes, Google can understand, and there's kind of a latent semantic indexing where they can understand a bit of context and pick up on things, but actually we don't want to make it difficult for Google, and we want to rank well. So we need to use the keyword, but there is definitely a world that doesn't need to be repeated time and time again in a piece of content, and that actually with the right kind of upfront on-page signals, you can then start to deviate away from that and get into the customer's language that's going to entice them in more and inspire them. So it's definitely balanced, and I think it's just trying to educate the SEO people that are going to be pushing for the keywords around everything we've talked about today, and how actually they're doing an injustice if they're just pushing the keyword, because you're going to end up with a page that's completely not exciting for the user. They might have landed on it and their SEO might have done a good job to get you there, but actually you're going to bounce off, you're not going to continue on. And it's starting to really look at measuring that and putting in place some tests, and showing and proving to them, look, here's some better human content that you still managed to make it rank, and wow, look at the conversion rate of this page versus this page, and this is what we need to do more of. And then they can't argue, can they?
No, they really can't. I couldn't agree more. I mean, maybe I'm a bit old school and maybe just a bit old, but I mean, what you're talking about is sort of SEO of 15 plus years ago, when, you know, we as SEOs, we looked at the keyword content of the page, and one of the factors that we looked for was having like a percentage of the actual keyword we were trying to rank for on the page. And we've come such a long way since then. I can remember visiting Mountain View and talking to the guys at Google, I think it was about 2007, 2008, and they were talking about how they're scanning books, English language books, for context, and so they could understand the contextual factors of English language. And I think we really are at that point, and I couldn't agree with you more, Becky, that we've arrived at the point where I think Google is quite clever. And as you say, it's a balance between the keyword, but it's also about writing great content that ranks well, but is great for the users. So I think for those writers out there like Jill, I think there's light at the end of the tunnel, because you can write like a human in a way and still rank well and still have great content, I would hope.
Yes, you definitely can, and it's going to get even easier, I think. As
get a good score on the borometer.
Yeah, definitely.
But no, I mean, just a quick shout out for Sarah Patterson as well. She just said, thank you so much, really, really interesting. It wasn't a question, it's more just feedback for yourself, Becky. So thank you, Sarah. I'm glad you really enjoyed that.
That's brilliant.
And then just digging into the audience pieces, just thinking about the where you started out in some respects. And I like the way that you guys categorize your personas. But Jeff's just coming in with a very simple question of, you know, what audiences work best? Is there a certain demographic, have you found? Is there a, you know, is there a certain age, or is it a, you know, is it work better for female type targeting or male type targeting? I guess it's just is it, you know, one for all, or is it kind of, you found that certain things really go well?
I think it works well for everybody, because we all have the same makeup at the end of the day. And I think, like, I was on a call earlier with a client that was a B2B client, and they were like, my customers don't think in this way. They won't be enticed by a marketing message, but they will, because they're humans. And I think we sometimes get wrapped up in thinking that maybe our customers don't react in this way. But actually, I think it's less about the demographic, and it's more about uncovering what it is that really drives them to make a decision. And I think from everything we do, a lot of marketing sits in that lion rationale, that's in that kind of especially in B2B, but also in consumer, it can be pushed that way, that we kind of go lion led, and we forget that actually emotions make up the biggest part of all the decisions we make. A great example, Daryl, who's the head of the human side, or director of the human side at Lab, he always talks about, he drives a Jaguar F-Pace, and him and his best mate,
Very nice too.
Yeah, very nice indeed. They both bought the same car, but they bought it for completely different reasons. His mate had spent months researching safety, because he's got a young family, and wanted to know performance, wanted to know that kind of miles per gallon, that type of thing. And Daryl bought it under a monkey brain of, I look really good in this car, I like it, I feel good in it, I feel good driving it. And the thing is, if we end up all of our messages sitting in one area, we actually, because demographically, Daryl and his mate they're the same age, they're probably in about the same salary banding, they live in the same area, they fit into all the same boxes if you just go on graphics. But actually, the reason they bought was totally different. So it's not necessarily that you would also just have one motivation. You might have more than one. And stepping into the realms of things like paid search, we can then also start to split test those and see which one has more impact, and then bring that back into our standard content once we've learned actually monkey works best for this, for example. So it's super interesting. And I think when you start to look at it, that you realize, yeah, that's true, that we do all have reasons and motivations and things that make us think why we do things. And often marketing doesn't think like that. We end up just going, oh, let me tell you this about this product, rather than why you would buy it.
No, and I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it. I think you really hit the nail on the head. I mean, Joanne asked a question around, can you give some top tips on matching audiences to conversion? But it's interesting, and just in what you said, so obviously bear that question in mind. As you say, you're looking at the dynamic of the Jaguar F-Type, and it could be two 40-something-year-old males who are buying that car for very different reasons. One has children, one doesn't have children. One wants to impress the girlfriend, one's been married for 15 years, kind of thing. So, is there can you give some top tips for matching audiences? Maybe it is just that open mind view of like what you were just describing, but any tips for Joanne would be amazing.
I guess through paid search is obviously a really good way that you can track it through, maybe not with something like a car purchase where you're not likely to buy online, but you'll be able to track the inquiry through. So you'll be able to pull it back to which ad is generating the right kind of interest. But also, I suppose, from a display point of view, you're going to start to see, oh, actually, hold on, the ad on Facebook worked really well as monkey, but didn't as lion. But actually on LinkedIn, it was more the lion ad that worked, for example. So in that sense, you can track it. But also, absolutely. I guess that works well. And I think it's trying to then also look at your customers once they have purchased. If you have any kind of survey as to reasons or feedback, it might be that you start to plant a question in there which they don't know that it's helping fuel your future marketing, but like, what was it that really made you buy this product? And actually you start to directly ask them and get that back, and then start to think which platform helps you then amplify that message best.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I guess in a way, just adding to that, this is kind of a question from me in some respects. I totally hear you on the paid search piece, and it's got me thinking in the sense that then would you do some sort of, testing and keyword testing and ad copy testing in paid search? Because obviously thinking about Bing and their acquisition of LinkedIn, you can tie in a lot more audience data into Bing compared to the likes of Google kind of thing. So you could actually do some really cute PPC testing for what you would then roll out and use in SEO. I'm just on the car one. I've heard a rumor from Bing recently. They're actually going to roll out car ads where you can actually sell cars online, which Google doesn't have. So you heard that one here. Would that be something which you would try? You know, actually do the ad copy testing and paid search and take it to the SEO learnings and the landing pages?
Exactly. Any client that we've got where we're doing paid search and SEO, that's exactly what we're doing. So you might not test monkey, lion and dog, because you might have said, well, actually, we know this is really monkey and dog, for example, but we will always have ads set up across at least 2, if not all 3, and then we'll test what works best and we'll keep refining. And then once we're confident that the tester's got enough data behind it, we'll take those learnings and put those into messaging for SEO, but also messaging for printed leaflets or direct mail or email marketing. Like, actually, this transcends further than SEO. This starts to become the way that you can talk to your customers and grab their attention, because we now start to, instead of telling them what we do, we look at what the motivation is to buy and we use that as the message.
Yeah, no, well, I think that's just a top tip, full stop, for anybody that's listening to that. I think that's such a good idea and such a cheap way of actually understanding the message, rather than going printing a million leaflets and finding out whether it works. Actually do the testing and find what you need to put on the leaflet, which that's a top tip of the day up to now. Quick message from Aviel. It's not a question, but fantastic, engaging presentation and lots of takeaways. Thank you so much. So thank you for listening in, Aviel. Well done, Becky. Andre's just asking as well, just about the dimensions, just thinking, you talked about the dimensions of the content and the name beside the ones, you know, the content of can you name beside the ones that you mentioned? The dimensions I noted are static versus dynamic, visual, audio, kinesthetic. Any other dimensions? Particularly interested in the online travel content. Is there anything that you would recommend within those dimensions for online travel?
Yeah, so thinking about selfish and selfless as well. So making sure it's basically, I guess, everything that our tool will give you, and it's free. Again, remember, I'm not selling at you. You don't even have to give me an email address. We wanted it just open to the world to use, because we want to see better content out there anyway. But yeah, it's those bits. And then there's other dimensions, and we've started to look into this, and we've around kind of personality, of looking at how people kind of read content, but we're not at a point to share that yet. But there's some interesting stuff coming out, so definitely worth following Reflect Digital after this, and I will share it with our lovely friends at Deep Crawl as well once we've got a report. But we've started looking particularly from an outreach perspective at journalists and how journalists are motivated to respond to emails or to engage with an email, and how we might be able to get better cut through by understanding journalists better. So we've had a survey out there for quite a while now, gathering data, and we're just about to start slicing that up and really looking at how to use that understanding to write better emails for outreach.
No, that's amazing, and obviously thank you for sharing the tool, and it really is much appreciated. It's certainly something that I'll be pushing out to the marketplace, because I think it's incredibly useful. Yeah. Axel from basically is asking the question of, I run a large e-com site, so kind of moving on from the travel. He says, I run a large e-com site. Can you use this at scale?
You can. You can't automate it, I think, or we haven't found a way to automate it yet, because it is, I think part of it is the upfront work. So that work on your audiences and understanding their motivations and understanding language that they're using, that you might be able to make your content more relevant. All of that actually doesn't need to be done on a content by content piece. It needs to just be done up front. So there's some investment and some time to spend there, and then you start to create rules and templates to go forward, making sure that you're using what you've learned about that audience to make your content come to life. So it does definitely, it's not if you just try and throw some words on a page and then you throw them through Rate My Content, and unless you're an amazing writer, and I'd love to hear from you if you are, I've never been able to get a good score. I then have to go back and refine it and work on it, because actually it does take effort to make it more engaging, but it pays dividends then in being more engaging to the audience and working better to drive those conversions through.
Right. Okay. I mean, that's good to know. And in some respects, it's sometimes very hard to automate these things at scale. And I think the value in what you're doing is showing the ability to write great content and have those pages work for you and be that gateway into the website, rather than trying to cover, you know, millions of pages as such in some respects.
Yeah, and it's prioritization as well, isn't it? I mean, when it comes to e-commerce, your actual product page itself, if depending on what you're selling, yes, it depends if it's something that's going to sell itself more by the imagery than by the text itself, because there's definitely things that we buy online on, I don't know, on Amazon, for example, where I never really read the description. I've searched for exactly what I need and it's the picture, but actually it's those content pages around the product pages that are the ones that are going to be really important to be more human focused. So it's prioritizing what are the gateway pages and where in the journey is content most likely to be digested and read, and where do we want it to be stickiest. And they're the ones to start with. And obviously, if you've got a lot of them, you might never get to all of them, but that's an ambition we can have to hit them all. No,
absolutely, without a doubt. Adriana's just asking as well, just is there kind of like, do you guys work it in a way where you have like a default setup, or is it kind of bespoke for each client? Do you kind of have to feel your way into it, or do you kind of go, right, these are the key things that we set up and run with on every client, and then once we've got the data, we then kind of change it up and tweak and test and do those sorts of things?
Yeah, so we definitely, sorry, motorbike going past. We definitely
joys of working from home.
I know. We definitely have a default kind of process that we follow. So, for example, when a new customer comes to us, the first thing that we would get them to do is to get involved in one of our persona workshops, where at the end of it, we're going to create a Bible for them of what their audience looks like, how to speak to them. We're going to give them a content matrix of ways to write hooks and messaging, and actually that's then going to start to flow into everything else. And then it depends what services then they've engaged us for as to where we next take that. But I think our clients probably get fed up with me harping on about it, but if they haven't done a persona workshop, I'm like, we can't do our best work. We need to go and do that, because it's and it's more than just what we're doing. It becomes something that then you share back with the business, because it's then helping everyone in your team, whether they're creating content or talking to customers, to learn how to frame things better that help your customer to understand it and to want to just say yes and to buy. So yeah, we definitely have built it into processes, and we're working to continue to make this more of our SEO process. I think the psychology side of Reflect Digital came in about 12 months ago when we joined the lab group, so it's still still in its infancy for us. So Lab built the monkey lion dog model about 5 years ago, so they've got tons of experience and they do tons of other things as well. But they're new to the world of search by working with us since we joined the group. So we've got a lot of experiments going on at the moment, and it's super exciting, some of the stuff that's going to be coming out. We've got 2 neuroscientists joining us for the summer as well. So expect some exciting content come like August, September, as it starts to our experiments start to give us some data.
Oh, that's amazing. And I'm really intrigued by all this, because it really interests me all that how this works together and the personas, and actually how you then relate that into SEO and paid search as well. For me, my background being heavy paid search for many, many years, as well as SEO. But we're out of time. I can't say how quickly that hour has flown by. They always seem to. We get into the questions. Anything which we haven't got answered today, obviously, that you guys have asked, we'll get some stuff over to Becky and see if we can wrap that up into the blog post as well. But a massive thank you to you guys for coming out on obviously what is the hottest day of the year, and I'm sure a lot of you are itching to get outside and enjoy the sunshine this evening. So a big thank you to you guys for coming on and listening. And obviously a massive thank you to Becky Simms, who is the CEO of Reflect Digital. I really appreciate you taking the time, Becky, and being on board with us today.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me, and thank you for everyone, all your brilliant questions. They've been that's been so interesting for me as well, so I love it. Yeah.
Thank you for the brilliant presentation. I've loved every minute of sitting here and listening to it. As mentioned, there will be a full recap on the Deep Crawl blog as normal. That will go live very imminently, obviously, this week, as we always do. So you guys will be able to listen back in on the audio, read the write-up. I'll include the questions, I'll include the top tricks, tips, and everything that's sat within the presentation from Becky today, and obviously a copy of the presentation as well. So really appreciate you guys being here. I look forward to having you all back in July for our next webinar. We'll announce the date very, very soon with the speaker, and we'll get that one out to you guys as well. So a massive thank you. My name's been Jon Myers, and it's been an honor to actually obviously host this one again this month. And I look forward to seeing you in July, and thank you.